Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Hi guys, we are on the final book from the 70s. So this is The Dead Zone. It was published in 1979. I have my Stephen King Library edition by Viking. So this is dedicated to his son Owen, and there's an author's note mentioning that the town of Castle Rock, Maine does not exist, and there is no 3rd Congressional District in New Hampshire. So this would be the first Castle Rock book, and I'm sure all of you know that that's a big town in the King universe, just like Derry, and I guess Jerusalem's Lot also. So this is the first book that has, it doesn't entirely take place there, but there is a lot of tie-in to Castle Rock. So in the prologue, it's 1953 and Johnny Smith is 6 years old. He is skating on a pond and there are like bigger boys playing hockey further down the way, and he's in the little kids area or whatever, just ice skating. And he decides he wants to ice skate backwards. So he starts doing it and he's really excited because he hadn't been able to do it before, and all of a sudden he's just, you know, channeling this power, and he skates on backwards, and one of the large boys from the hockey arena ends up crashing into him, and he hits his head, he bounces his head pretty hard on the ice, and he blacks out. And the adults at the hockey rink, or whatever you want to call it, the lake, they don't tell his parents. Like, they give it a minute to see if he's okay, and then they ask him, you know, do you remember who you are, who your parents are you basically, you know, cognizant of your current surroundings, and he answers the questions, doesn't really remember it himself, and goes home, and, you know, he just tells his mother, I fell down. The fact that he blacked out, I think, is one major reason why his parents should have been told, even if he was okay afterwards. Then we're introduced to Greg Stilson, who is possibly my most hated Stephen King character ever. He's in the top 5. I loathe this man. He is a traveling salesman. He's going back and forth across Nebraska and Iowa, and he's selling Bibles. And it's 1955. He pulls up to someone's house, they're not home, and their dog is barking at Stilson and growling if Stilson, you know, gets too far onto the property. And Stilson leaves his car, takes a gun that he's filled with some sort of ammonia concoction, and he shoots the dog with this. And the dog is in pain, it burns, it's terrible. And the dog, instead of running away, which is what Stilson expected, tries to attack him. And that's just unacceptable behavior, I guess, to Stilson, and he kicks the dog so much, so hard, that he kills it. And it's a very lengthy description, it's very detailed, and as a dog lover, I really hate reading that scene. Could be one of the reasons why I haven't picked this book up in a long time. I hate Stilson so much. I hate him so much. I am one of those people who will judge anyone by the way they treat animals, and that behavior is just abhorrent. There is no reason for something like that. And yeah, he leaves the dog to die and leaves. He travels down the road, not bothered at all. You know, he has rage issues and he was sickly as a child. He has headaches now, and the headaches are kind of like coinciding with these rage-filled episodes, but I don't care. I just don't care. I have no sympathy for someone who kills a dog like that. So now we get into part 1, which is called Wheel of Fortune. And chapter 1 takes place in late October 1970. Johnny and Sarah are 2 teachers who work in the same school. It's a high school. And they met, they liked each other, they started kind of dating each other, and they're going to a county fair, one of the last ones of the season. So when Sarah arrives at Johnny's apartment for their date, he he tells her to come in, and the room is dark, and he jumps out at her with a mask on. He's wearing like this half human, half monster mask, and it's glow in the dark, and it's creepy, and he just appears when she's opened the door into his apartment, and it scares her, and it's very symbolic because it's like a Jekyll and Hyde type mask where it's half human, half monster, and that becomes a theme running on throughout the book. People's double sides. It's kind of like a dark half prototype in a way. And we have Greg Stilson, who is charming but has these rage-filled moments where he becomes this evil monster, and that's what I think of. Sarah has dated someone in the past who was this kind of frat boy type person, and he had this really mean streak once he drank, and he was kind of a monster on those occasions, and a charming fellow, when he wanted to put on a front. So they go to a county fair, which is about 20 miles away. They have a good time. It's very cute, late season, crisp air. They're in love. They're happy. They're, playful. And it kind of makes me think of Joyland, which, is a way more recent Stephen King book. But there are notes of Joyland in that little carnival. They go into a mirror maze, which, again, you've got the playing with images and the perceptions. So that's another thing, like the mask, the half and half mask. You have the mirror that shows all these different sides to a person, and funhouse mirrors, they shrink you and they make you elongated and all that stuff. So they're leaving the fair, and one of the vendors calls Johnny over because Johnny said something about he was feeling lucky, and the vendor just goes into his little speech, want to try your luck, blah, blah, blah. And Johnny says, why not? So he steps over to this Wheel of Fortune. Quote, the midway behind them was almost completely empty now, and as the overcast had melted off above them, it had turned chilly. Page 32. So then there's this very lengthy description of Johnny winning this, like, roulette wheel type game. And he gets a crowd of people who are leaving. They start gathering around here on their way out. They're watching it. Some people are betting alongside of him, and he just keeps winning and keeps winning and keeps winning. And his childhood accident has given him some kind of flashes of what number to pick. So he ends up winning $540. During the last spin, Sarah gets very sick. She runs off and vomits. So she is feeling really ill. Johnny decides to take her home. They were actually going to sleep together for the first time that night, and now Sarah's sick. He takes her home. He offers to stay with her, and she's kind of like, no, I don't really want him to see me sickly. I don't want him to see me any more than he's already seen me be sick, She asks him about his lucky streak, and he says, quote, once in a while I get feelings, that's all. For as long as I can remember, since I was just a little kid, and I've always been good at finding things people have lost. Page 47. So, like I said, Johnny offers to stay over, but Sarah doesn't want him to see her in this state any more than he already has. So his cab arrives, and he gets in. He asks to sit in the front. The guy's like, fine, whatever. They head out. On their way to Johnny's apartment, they are coming up to a hill, and coming over the hill toward them are two cars drag racing. So there's one car in their lane and another car in the proper lane, and the car that's in their lane hits them head on. There's a huge crash, and Johnny gets ejected through the windshield and lands in some sort of a bog about, I think it's 25 feet? Yeah, 25 feet away from the car. The cab driver dies, the driver of the car that hits them dies, and Johnny goes into a coma. So Herb and Vera Smith, Johnny's parents, get a call at 2 a.m. from a cop. Quote, a phone call in the middle of the night usually meant one of three things. An old friend had gotten totally shit-faced and had decided you'd be glad to hear from him even at 2 in the morning. A wrong number, bad news. Page 52. So Herb has answered the phone. He's apprehensive about it. He's nervous about what the person is going to say to him. And Vera is in the background just having these religious hysterics. She prays, she shrieks, she repeats things that Herb says. He has to shush her a lot. He's like, I need to hear this. Shut the fuck up, woman. Quote, "Oh Christ, we sound like one of those weird off-Broadway shows," Herb thought. He felt embarrassed for Vera and for Sergeant Meggs, who must surely be hearing Vera like some nutty Greek chorus in the background. Page 55. So Vera is convinced that it's like punishment for the way they've been living. Herb isn't very religious, and she is, and she's convinced that they've brought this on themselves, and their sins, they're paying for their sins now. Quote, "He felt pity for her. For the last 10 years, his wife had been walking somewhere in a gray area between devotion to her Baptist faith and what he considered to be a mild religious mania." Page 56. She's kind of like Carrie's mom in Carrie. She's just very over the top. She's gripped in the throes of religion, and she is convinced that everything is, you know, God's will and there's a plan, all that stuff. So one of the teachers calls Sarah in the morning, and Sarah is unaware of all this. When Johnny had left, he promised Sarah that he would call in for her the next day. You know, he's like, "You're sick, just sleep in. I will call them and tell them," or, you know, probably won't even call them. He'll just show up at school to teach and then tell them that Sarah's not coming in. So a fellow teacher calls Sarah, and she breaks the news about Johnny. So Sarah is devastated. She goes to the hospital and she sees Herb and Vera waiting in the waiting room, and she goes over and introduces herself and, you know, meets his parents, which I don't even know what I would do in that situation. Herb seems to really like her. Vera is very cold, bitchy, a little accusatory. So they get news from the doctor that Johnny is in a coma. He had a subdural hematoma. His parents hang around for about a week. There's no change in Johnny. Now we switch over, and it's the 12th of November, 1970, and we're in Castle Rock now. And the killer, as he is called, is sitting on a bench in a park. Quote, "He wasn't a killer yet, not really, but it had been on his mind a long time, killing had." Page 69. So this guy is waiting in a deserted park for someone to come along that he's going to murder. And it flashes back. His mother was a very domineering woman, and it sounds like she was super negative about sex. So when he was 7 years old, his mom burst into his room without knocking, and she saw that he was naked, and he was not doing anything exactly, but he was exploring his body, I guess, a little bit. And she flips out. She flips out on him, and she starts talking to him about, if you do anything sexual, you'll get diseases, your penis will rot and fall off, and just all this crazy stuff that, you know, is kind of the behavior that breeds serial killers when you're super, super repressive about sex stuff. And so she gets a clothespin and makes him wear it on his penis for 2 hours. Yeah. He's got a lot of issues because of his mother. And he's waiting in this this deserted park. There's a girl who comes by who he knows, and she knows him. They call each other by name. Her name is Alma Frechette. He tells her, "Let's go look at this thing on the bandstand." And once he gets her there, he strangles her. And it's a very, very upsetting scene, the way it's described. And she's trying to get away from him, and she can't. And he's like strangling her so hard that his fingers kind of disappear into her flesh. It's really, really descriptive and brutal. And so he kills her. He strangles her to death, and then he rapes her. And she is found the next day. And it's mentioned that he is slick. It's mentioned a couple times. And even when she's fighting him off, she can't get any kind of purchase on him because he is slick. So that is a clue for later. So Vera, Johnny's mom, is getting more and more drawn into this world of flying saucers and people getting like saved for the final end of the world thing and taken to planets. It sounds very culty. She's starting to believe in like miracle potions and things that are blessed, and you have to send away for by mail, and you get like an ampule of water that's supposed to heal people and all this stuff. And she's kind of taken in by con artists a lot. And Herb stops her when he can. You know, he stops her from mailing in checks made out to these people, and he doesn't let her participate as much as possible. So Sarah is trying to carry on with her life. Quote, "Her brief thing with Johnny, she could not even properly call it an affair, was part of another season now, and she could feel him beginning to slip away from her." Page 75. So as we head into winter, it's been over a month, there's no change, so she's kind of starting to let go. Summer of 1971, Greg Stilson again. He is running a real estate and insurance business in New Hampshire. He makes some sort of an alliance with a biker guy named Sonny Elliman, and he basically is kind of running a town, and he tells this guy who's got drugs on him, hey, I won't get you in trouble for these drugs, but you're going to owe me a favor later. It's been almost a year since Johnny went into his coma. Sarah starts dating a guy named Walter Hazlitt. He proposes to her, she accepts, and they marry in early 1972. Herb comes to the wedding. Vera is off on some kind of a farm thing where they're going to wait for saucers to come take them away. And she's in Vermont. I think she paid like $700 some to go to this thing. It's run by the American Society of the Last Times. So when no saucer comes for them and it starts getting cold, she comes back home, and she's not even dejected. She's just thinking, oh, well, we weren't pure enough or something like that. Like there was a reason why the saucers didn't come get us. It wasn't because there aren't any saucers. It's because something they did was not good enough to be taken away. So now it's 2 years since Johnny went into the coma. And Herb is thinking about how hard his life is, and, I really feel bad for him. He's got this crazy religious nut that he has to deal with on a daily basis, and Johnny is in the hospital still, and they're hemorrhaging money. Quote, "And it was always in October that his thoughts turned treacherously to leaving them both, his possibly certifiable wife and his sleeping son, who was probably already dead by any practical definition." Page 86. So I don't feel like he's out of line at all. I feel really sorry for Herb. And he has these like lovely images of Johnny growing up and, being a good father and how much love there was between him and Johnny. But at the same time, he's starting to wish that Johnny would die so that, all of this could just be over. And, it would end everyone's suffering. And I see that. I mean, it's better to know one way or the other. At least if you knew that he was going to get out of it, you could hold on. But it's so hard to think about. So other things happen. Sarah gets pregnant. She has a baby on Halloween. Dennis Edward Hazlitt. Herb breaks a leg. January 1st, 1975, 2 boys find the body of Carol Dunbarger. She is the 4th Castle Rock Strangler victim. So they find her sticking out of the snow when they're having a snowball fight. So now Johnny's starting to wake up, and he does it by degrees. He's slowly waking up, slowly coming back to reality, and he kind of sees things through like this gauze or this membrane, where he hasn't completely broken into the world again, but he is becoming aware of things. So probably like how you rise from sleep in degrees. So finally, he wakes up on May 17th, 1975. Quote, "From the way he felt, he guessed he had been here for some time. He might have been blacked out for as long as a week or 10 days. Page 102. So he has deduced that after his accident, he's in a hospital, and he thinks it's been maybe 10 days. I feel so bad for him. He is waking up and thinking that only a short time has elapsed, and he's going to find out that he's been in a coma for 4.5 years. I cannot even imagine what that would do to me if I woke up and found out that 4.5 years of my life were just gone. Ugh. So a nurse comes in to adjust him, and so she's lifting his head to fluff up his pillow, and her touch makes him know things about her. So when she goes to get the doctor comes in, and he's kind of giving Johnny the runaround a little bit, won't give him any straightforward answers exactly, and Johnny reaches over and grabs the doctor because he knows that if he touches him, he'll get more information, and that's how he finds out how long he's been asleep. So his parents come to visit. He gets the information from his dad about Sarah. Quote, his body felt sick and old, and suddenly he was drowning in his sense of loss. The lost time was suddenly sitting on him like a load of bricks. A real thing, not just a vague concept. Page 115. So poor Johnny, he has lost Sarah. So he had just, in his mind, he had just told her that he loved her. She had told him the same thing. Johnny's doctors tell him that there's this theory that people who come out of long-term comas are usually people who have had a brain injury in the past. So it's kind of like your first brain injury inoculates you, I guess, in some way for later on down the road when you have another brain injury. I don't know. And it's just a theory, and I don't know if that's even a real thing or if it's something that Stephen King made up. So Johnny starts taking some tests where they have him visualize things. So they give him the name of something and he has to visualize it while he's hooked up to these machines. And there are a couple things, like a picnic table, where he knows what it is, but he can't get the image. He just is unable to call that up. And these things are going to be known as dead zones. So these are the things that he just can't see because his brain has lost little bits. There's Dr. Wyzak, who is my favorite of the two doctors, and Johnny likes him and he wants to kind of repay him his kindness, and he asks for a photo of his mother that he keeps in his wallet. And first of all, the doctor's like, well, how did you even know that I keep this photo? And then he says, you know, my mom is dead. She died a long time ago in Poland during the war, and, you know, that's that. And Johnny takes the photo and he has this crazy, like he's watching a movie type thing. He goes into this trance and he sees all this stuff happen. He sees this imagery. He can kind of see what this woman is experiencing, and he knows what she's thinking, kind of. His mother was struck and had amnesia and went and lived somewhere else, couldn't remember who she was, had some children with this person, and she moved to California and she's still alive. And, you know, that's just crazy. So the two other people in the room, the other doctor, Dr. Brown, and this nurse who's in there helping, they're both disturbed. Wyzak is fascinated and, you know, interested. And so, you know, these other two people are kind of freaked out. They think he's kind of creepy, I guess, Johnny. So later, Dr. Wyzak says, you know, I got a number for this woman that you told me about who lives in California, who has this name, and I recognize the voice. I couldn't talk to her, but, you know, I know it's her, so I know that your story checks out. And he warns Johnny. He's like, you know, if you have this, like, second sight type thing, you have to be very careful about letting other people know about it. You know, you don't want to get involved in something that is going to be too difficult to follow through. Quote, some things are better not seen and some things are better not found. Page 132. So Wyzak warns Johnny about embracing this second sight because it's going to kind of be a stigma. Johnny has his first surgery and then he has a very hard reunion with Sarah. It's awkward and sad, and I feel really bad for him and her. You know, she had to wait so long, and then she ended up falling in love with someone else. She kisses him goodbye, and he sees that she had lost her wedding ring while she and her husband were on their honeymoon, and she hadn't told anyone this. She was embarrassed, and he bought her a second wedding ring to replace it. And so no one knew about this, and Johnny's like, you know, you thought you lost that, but actually it fell into a suitcase while you were packing. So if you look in that suitcase, it'll be there. So she goes home, and sure enough, it's in that suitcase. She kind of freaks out a little bit, and she throws the ring in the toilet and flushes it. Then she just starts feeling bad for herself. Quote, she should think about how once you made your choices in this crazy world, you had to live with them, and she would not think about Johnny Smith and his crooked, charming smile anymore. Page 148. But we all know she's going to think about him more. Johnny is still in the hospital. He's offered a position at the same school that he taught at before. There's a teacher who's going to go on leave in December, and so the guy was like, hey, you know, I would like you to take this job if you want it. Johnny tentatively agrees and says, yeah, I'll think about it. So Johnny is almost ready to leave the hospital. He is in a therapy session with Eileen, who is his physical therapist, and he's doing sit-ups. And he finishes, she goes to help him up, she grabs him by the arm, and as he's being pulled up, he has a vision, and he sees that her house is on fire. She had left a stove burner on that morning, and the drapes have caught on fire. So he tells her, and she's like, how could you know that? That's weird, you know? And he's like, fine, I'm gonna call the fire department if you don't act on this. So he goes into the little nurses station where there are some nurses, and he calls the fire department, and he's like, I'd like to report a fire. He gives them the address, he makes Eileen give it to him, and he tells her to call her friend who lives next door just to like say, hey, do you notice anything weird about my house? And the person's like, yeah, there's smoke coming out of your window. And so Johnny is, you know, it's a good thing, but now everyone's looking at him like he is a freak. And the nurses in the nurses station are just kind of like, And so you know they're going to spread it through the hospital. Quote, he began to limp up the hall toward the elevator, leaving them to start the gossip on its way. He was tired, his legs hurt, his hip joints felt as if they had broken glass in them. He wanted to go to bed. Page 161. And that is where we will leave it today. Have